this is Tim, and today I'm going to be talking about romance. Ooh. Oh. um, as you can see, there's some hearts above me, and I thought it was a good backdrop for this video. Valentine's Day is coming up soon, so this is probably a good topic to throw out to the community and see what they think. So, I had a comment on a video recently, and I'm going to read it for you, and then I'm going to discuss a little bit, and then I'm going to ask you a question. So, Hartman's grad, I think it's how you, Hartman's grad, I think that's how you pronounce that. He asked us a question. He says, one thing I would like to ask is this. Seduction and lust, as you have pointed out, can be handled in a variety of ways and can be effective devices. But I've never seen advice of how to incorporate romance and love into RPGs. Even more so than sex, love is a popular theme in a lot of fantasy settings and generally an accepted part of mainstream fiction. But it's not something I've ever really seen approached in RPGs. I have recently just read over John Wick's Houses of the Blooded that has a section on romance, seduction, and these sorts of things. And a lot of the advice in there is pretty good to talk about. I'll hopefully be dealing with that in a review if I ever get around to doing it. But romance, I think the problem with RPGs and romance is this is a stereotypical guy hobby, and let's face it, a lot of us are just not very romantic. We are more concerned with what is in front of our eyes than just making a good evening, a romantic evening. But that's not always the case. There are exceptions, of course. So how can you incorporate romance into your RPGs? Something to think about that we don't really talk about right now in the modern era is courtly romance or courtly love. And don't get that confused with Courtney Love, Kurt Cobain's wife. But with courtly romance, courtly love, this is a way that noble ladies were able to flirt and have relationships with other men, but there were certain lines that weren't crossed. If you think of Lancelot and Maid Marian, that's a good example of courtly love, until they go too far, of course. But up to a certain point, that's what it is. Where it's a very slow progression. There's things like, being able to speak with them, kissing them on the hand, kissing them inside the wrist, back of the leg. There's all kinds of various ways you could set that up in your game. Where there's a specific, if you think about it in American terms, first base, second base, third base, and so forth and so on. But you never go all the way. At least that's the idea of the courtly love thing. It's just a progression of getting closer with somebody, keeping boundaries so that your husband, doesn't get too mad at you, but you still want to keep it, under wraps and, on the down low, all that good stuff. So you can incorporate that. That's kind of difficult to do. You'd have to make sure you have NPCs, and maybe even if you have a female and a male character in your party, that can blossom amongst them. I've always kind of wanted to have, in a Firefly game, for instance, two characters getting married, or at least having an official romantic attachment to one another. And so far, that's kind of been happening in the Firefly play-by-post that I've been running. Now I'm not running, I'm actually a player, which is nice. But it's almost like in the beginning stages. It's not a full-fledged relationship yet. So that's something that I would like to see happen more often in games, where character and character are they've formed a bond, and that can be fun to role play through, especially if you're very comfortable with the people you're playing games with. So there's that. There are also, like in modern games, there's why can't you have a wife? Why can't you have a family? Why couldn't you have these things and try to role play out the difficulties in that? Let's say you're a Hunter the Reckoning or Hunter the Vigil kind of character, and you actually have a family. You have to balance out hunting monsters and paying the mortgage and trying to have romantic evenings with your wife, which can be very hard if you have all this traumatic stuff happening, or in the middle of the night you decide to get out of bed and, go hunt werewolves or whatever. So it's definitely another layer of detail that you can add to your character. You can do that in fantasy games as well. You could have, hell, you could have a wife in every town if you were of that mindset. There's not really, communication isn't that well used in those kinds of settings. So if you travel around a lot, I don't see why you couldn't do something like that. And you could be a polygamist. So how do we go about doing it? I think having the NPCs there, and I think it would work best if this was instigated by the player themselves. If you have a proactive player that perhaps pulls you aside and says, I think my character would have an attachment with this NPC, or, talk to another player if that's what you want to try to do. Player-to-player communication, which I think often gets forgotten when we talk about things like this. Get two people together and see, okay, let's try to work through this. What kind of relationship would they have? How would they interrelate to one another? What are their quirks? What are their problem areas? Like any relationship, there's going to be, tough times and good times. So think about those. Talk to your players, see what they're into, and maybe just talk to your players and see if they even want to go down that road, because they might not. I mentioned Houses of Blood before, that's actually an integral part of that game. In fact, if you don't have a wife in that game, it's actually a detriment to ruling the lands that you're in control of, because your wife can do a lot of stuff for you as well. And like they say, behind every great man there's a very powerful and strong woman. So keep that in mind as well. So lots of thoughts, but mainly I just want to put out there to the community, how would you incorporate romance into your campaign, into various settings, various genres? How would you go about doing it? What are you most comfortable talking about? Maybe you're a big sci-fi fan, so let's hear how you would incorporate romance into a sci-fi setting. Let's say you're a horror World of Darkness guy or girl. How would you incorporate romance into your setting, into your campaign, your chronicle? Same thing with fantasy. Fantasy probably has the most people that are into it, I would guess. So how would you do that? Would you have, just various people, like wife, mistresses? Lots of possibilities here. So I'd be interested to hearing your thoughts. Heartsman Grad, I'm sure, would be as well. And I'll make sure to let him know that I'm actually doing this video, so he gets to watch it and see the responses. But that's pretty much it. And have a good Valentine's Day out there. Don't forget, that has a whole host of problems all to itself. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.